Welcome back to woodcraft716.com. I'm Mike Weibel, and on this channel we build awesome projects with inexpensive tools. And if you're new to woodworking, you can build all this stuff. No problem, just follow along. Today we're going to be talking about making this awesome wooden mallet. But to make this wooden mallet, we're going to go ahead and make a few essential tools that are always handy around the shop. We have a push block, a push stick, and a tenon jig. All these tools will assist us in making this wooden mallet. None of them are hard to make, and you can usually make them out of scrap wood you have laying around your shop. So let's get right into this. The first tool we're going to be making is this push block. Super easy to make. We'll be using this on the table saw to push our material through in a safe manner. It has a handle and a replaceable back piece. Super convenient and safe. I'm glad we made this one. The first thing we're going to do is cut one 2x4 at 11 inches. The next thing we're going to do is move our miter saw to 45 degrees, stand our 2x4 up on edge, and cut that at 11 inches. It doesn't have to be exactly 11 inches, or it doesn't have to be exactly 45 degrees. We're going to trim it up after. Now that that's all set, we'll take it over to the table saw and we'll just take off the rounded edges. So we're over at the table saw and we're just going to take the rounded edges off of these 2x4s. Probably should have done this beforehand, but it really doesn't matter. They're both going to end up being the same. Now that these two are nice and straight, we're just going to glue them up like this, two pieces together, and we're going to glue them and clamp them. Okay, we got our squeeze clamps on there. We're just going to put this off to the side and let it dry. We're just going to sand all the edges smooth, top and bottom, sides, make it look good. Okay, we're back at the miter saw and we're just going to go ahead and cut this 1/8 inch plywood that I had laying around. We're just going to cut it the same thickness as the back so it works as a catch. Perfect. We got just about a 1/2 inch overhang, which I hardly ever cut pieces thinner than that. And we're just going to screw this on because it's going to be replaceable over time as it gets chewed up. The last thing we're going to do is just attach this handle that I had laying around. It's just a cheap handle. You can get them at the big box stores, relatively cheap. And just like that, this thing is done. I think this is a good one, and we're going to go ahead and throw it in the keeper pile. Moving on to this push stick we made here. Really easy to make. We're going to go ahead and cut it out on the scroll saw. You obviously could use a jigsaw if you wanted to. The important thing here is to try to get a 90 degree right here. These are so easy to make that every time I wear one out, I just make a new one and cut it out on the scroll saw. And you can use thicker and thinner materials so you can really get in tight to your fence if you're cutting a narrow piece, or you can have a nice big fat handle to hold on to. All right, now that our push stick is all cut out and ready to go, we're just going to hit it with the orbital sander and round off some of the edges and put it in the drawer. So the next thing we're going to be making is this tenon jig. It fits over your fence and it holds a piece of wood up nice and straight. You just clamp it on and it'll hold it vertical while we send it through the blade. We're going to be using this to make the handle for our hammer. Okay guys, to make this tenon jig, we just went ahead and got a good dimension on how tall our fence is. Then we set our fence to that dimension, and we're going to go ahead and rip this piece down and probably take it in half. It doesn't have to be a very wide jig. Did you see how good our push block worked? Now that we have our piece ripped down, we're just going to go ahead and take it over to the miter saw and cut it in half. This is just a hair over 22 inches, so I'll get two 11-inch pieces out of it. And bam, just like that, we have two 11-inch pieces. We're going to go ahead and put those against the fence so we can get an accurate dimension on how wide we need to make the top of this jig. Now we'll take this over to the miter saw and cut it the same length as our sides. Now we're going to go ahead and glue and countersink some screws on one side, the blade side. We'll do that first, making sure not to have an overhang, but to be as flush as we can. Then we'll just put some screws and countersink them down the other side. And just like that, we're good to go. The next thing we're going to do is cut our riser piece. Mine just happens to be the same width as my block. So you want to do that first, and then I'm going to cut this at 10 3/4 inches. Now that that's done, we're just going to go ahead and glue and screw this side panel on. And here we're just going to use a square and line up this side, clamp it, countersink it, and screw it on. Slides good. Next thing we're going to do is put the line on there for the brace. I'm just making this brace 1 3/4 inch wide. It doesn't really matter. You can make it any size you want. See how good that push stick worked? Well, that's a keeper. So I'm going to go ahead and take this over to the miter saw, and I'm going to cut it about 5.5 inches. The length really doesn't matter, other than you don't want the blade to hit it if you're cutting thinner than 3/4 inch material. Now I'm just going to put 2 countersinks in this. I'm going to do that before I attach it to the board so it doesn't move at all. Glue it, clamp it, and put 2 screws in it. Okay, we're going to go ahead and check it. That looks pretty good. And that's it. We're good to go with this bad boy. The wood I've selected for our shop mallet is just some hickory I had left over from some cupboard doors that I made. The first thing we'll do is cut a strip at 2 3/4 inch wide. The next thing we're going to do is take this over to the miter saw and cut 3 pieces at 5 inches. Now we're just going to take the middle piece and cut it in half. Be very careful holding your piece. If you're not comfortable with it, use some kind of stick or brace or clamp to hold it down. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is start preparing the handle. I just have this piece of wood here, and I'm going to cut it down to size. If you do have some tight grain on your wood, go ahead and use that side, keeping in mind that your handle has to be the same thickness as your middle piece. I just have the fence set to 1 5/8 inches, and we're going to go ahead and rip this down. Just like that. Now we're going to try out our tenon jig. I just have the handle in here with the wide side clamped down. We're just going to go ahead and run it through. I have my blade set to 3 inches. Our hammer head is 2 3/4 inches, so this will leave just a little bit to stick out the top. We're just going to take a blade thickness off of each side. That'll create some kind of a tenon so that our handle will stop at the butt of the hammer head. Then after marking the center, we just went ahead, lowered the blade about 1/4 inch, and we're going to run a strip right up the middle for the wedge. Just like that. Then I just took one of the side pieces and carefully marked the center, put my handle on there and marked it. Now we're just going to put some glue on that side, put our piece on there, and I'm going to shoot 2 brad nails in it just to hold it while this glue dries. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing to the other side. Next thing we're going to do is line up the top the best we can and glue it on. And we'll just put this off to the side to dry. Cool. Now that the glue is drying, I just put a mark about 1 inch up from the bottom and 3/4 inch from the shoulder. And we're going to go ahead and chamfer the sides of the mallet just for a little smoother grip. Just like that. Okay, we're back at the miter saw, and what we need to do now is set it to 2.5 degrees and cut our wedge. I'm just using a leftover from the top piece that we had. The next thing we're going to do is leave our angle set at 2.5 degrees, and we'll go ahead and cut the top. So as you can see here, I'm just over at the belt sander. I'm hitting all the sides of this thing, trying to take out some of the burn marks that are on the edges and getting it nice and smooth, and she'll be good to go. And there you go. I think this thing is looking pretty good. Now we're just taking the router and we're going around all the edges. Going to put a nice little chamfer on this. Okay, we're just going to hit it with the hand sandpaper and just take off some of these burn marks. Now that all our pieces are sanded, I just wanted to make a note that I drilled a hole just a little bit wider than the kerf of the blade. That way it doesn't split down the handle when we put our wedge in. The next thing we're going to do is glue this up. So I'm going to put some blue painter's tape around the side just so that any squeeze out doesn't get on the handle and be hard to sand. Then I'm just going to squeeze it in there, put the wedge in, putting glue on both sides of the wedge, and then tap it down with another mallet that I made. Then it's back over to the miter saw where I carefully lined it up to cut off the end of the handle and wedge. Last thing I'm going to do to this mallet, and I might as well do my push stick while we're at it, is add some of this Howard Feed and Wax. It's just a wood polish and conditioner. I use it a lot in turning, and we're just going to go ahead and wipe it on, and in half an hour or so wipe off if there's any extra. Kind of give it a buff with a dry rag. We're just going to let that sit for about a half an hour. If it needs another coat, we'll put it on. If it doesn't, we'll buff it up and they'll be done. And that's it. These 4 tools, they all have their purpose around the shop, and we'll probably use them all quite often. If you got any value out of this video, subscribe, like, share, do all the social media things we like to do. Or if you have any thoughts or ideas on future builds, let me know in the comments below. And remember to always create and inspire. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next video.